We're back with part 2 of my gun-only challenge run of Persona 5 Royal. In the last episode we cleared Kamoshida, Madarame before coming across the indomitable wall of Shadow Kaneshiro. Unable to find a way around this roadblock, we were forced to resort to our emergency freeze sprays to proceed. So, with our pride slightly dented, we move on to the next challenge. Before tackling Futaba's palace, we have another trip into Mementos in order to proceed with our fortune, death, and temperance confidants. All of these battles are easily managed with our usual strategy of technicals. Futaba's palace welcomes us with a gut punch, another impossible wall. The Mott mini-bosses are immune to gun, and will either turn a party member into a rat, use Megiddo to attack, or summon a minion, meaning we cannot reflect their attacks back at them. With no other recourse, we're forced to turn to the freeze sprays once more, but at least this time they actually act as intended, freezing the Mott, leaving it vulnerable to our gun attacks. The rest of the palace is mostly a breeze. There are no basic enemies who repel gun here, thankfully, besides the Nagas who will occasionally land a rare counter. Otherwise, progress is swift, with our modded weapons inflicting ailments and setting up lots of technicals. Furthermore, by itemizing Shikiaoji under Fusion Alarm, I get access to Triple Down, a big upgrade on Double Shot, and I was also able to fuse Satanta to get early access to Charge on Joker. That being said, there is one more impossible battle in this palace, the Wheelseed boss, Alalat. They repel gun and drain ice, meaning I cannot use my usual attacks, nor can I use freeze sprays or even repel its own ice-based attacks. This is the first Wheelseed we'll have to leave, but we will be able to obtain it at a later point by buying it from Jose's shop in Mementos. That leaves the Wakaba boss fight, which under regular gameplay is pretty simple. Under these challenge rules, it's frankly not that different. We avoid bringing Ryuji, since some of Wakaba's attacks are wind element, and otherwise stay on the defensive until the dialogue prompts. We make life easy for ourselves by supporting Futaba, and the ballista, which she brings in, then enables us to finally put on the damage. Repeat the strategy for a few more turns until victory. Okumura's palace is up next, and unfortunately I've lost my footage of defeating the various mini-bosses, meaning we only have 2 fights to look at. Firstly, the Willseed boss. Not much to say there. Thankfully, Shadow Okumura himself is a bit more of a challenge. This fight is already notorious, providing a stern challenge under regular conditions, and restricting ourselves to gun damage does little to assist. Thankfully, we have some new tricks of our own. Firstly, Haru. Haru is an absolute godsend in this run, being a character we can genuinely build as a powerful gun user. Her utility is immense too, both with her defensive wall skills, along with having access to Confuse, which we will eventually be able to technical off of with gun, using the book from Jinbocho. She will be a key party member in all remaining challenges. On Joker's side, I've been able to fuse White Rider, the first persona which gets access to gun boost. I also have a Hecaton Kairos with Apt Pupil, with the aim of getting some lucky crits. As you'll see later on, crits are a really important part of my strategy for this fight. I know that I could grind. At this stage of the game, we've got all the skills we need to be able to grind a persona up to maximum stats. And we could also feasibly get all of the important damaging skill cards in order to make an absolute beast. But I didn't want to just completely trivialize the rest of the game at this point, and so instead we're focusing on trying to utilize the skills that we have. I'm not at that higher level still, and I'm going to be hoping for some crits to help me out in this battle. The first phases of the boss are not too interesting, as triple downs from Joker and Haru are more than enough to take down the early robots. But by the time the blue robots make their entry, more careful setup is needed. Ideally, we want Haru and Joker both tarot carded up, Joker to be charged, and the enemies to be Racunded as well. All of that, as well as avoiding any enemy attacks and statuses. It was only on this last successful run did I actually discover you can inflict ailments on the robots, which could have made this stage of the fight much easier. After the blue wave comes the green, and once again we need ideal setup. At this point I am definitely aiming for crits, as I can't quite do enough damage to take them all out in 2 turns. But on this run, and even on the run previously, I got those lucky crits. So, taking full advantage of those lucky critical hits, we move on to the Executive Director. My second attempt at this fight ended tragically at this stage, at the hangs of the Big Bang Challenge. Without both Rakikaja and guarding, Joker will be taken out by this attack from full HP. So I have to sacrifice party members accordingly to set myself up. Thankfully, the enemy doesn't use that attack again, and once that's passed, we can generally just whittle down his HP using triple downs, as well as the usual buffing, debuffing, healing, and so on. With the Executive Director finally down, all that's left is to let Robo Haru self-destruct, and let Haru herself land the finishing blow. With Okumura defeated, our next trip to the metaverse is sooner than expected as Kasumi awakens to her power. This fight is nothing special, and neither are the mementos requests we complete during this arc, making short work of the blockages to our Fortune, Hanged Man, Hermit, and most importantly, our Tower Confidant. We've been hardlining Shinya's Confidant in the time between Okumura and Sae, since we will desperately need his abilities in the coming palaces. We've also started Haru's Confidant, not only for her useful combat abilities, but also her gardening, since Earth Beans are one of the best items in the game for us at this point. By now, we're ready to enter Sae's casino. In contrast to the previous two palaces, this one is full of mini-bosses. However, we have the matching of them all easily. At this point, I had read Knowing the Heart, allowing me to technical off of Confuse with gun skills. Furthermore, I built a Magatsu Izanagi Picaro, whose trait Hollow Jester allows for insane damage on enemies inflicted with ailments. I can access one-shot kill by fusing Seth, and I grabbed skill cards for Gun Boost and Gun Amp by itemizing White Rider, both in and not in the fusion alarm. I've also been using the Jazz Club to give my teammates a wider range of support options to replace their unnecessary offensive skills, as well as buffing Haru's stats as much as possible. With this setup, we rip through Sae's palace, with only one enemy proving an issue. That enemy is Rangda, and the fight with 3 of them in the arena was looking ominous. Here are enemies that repel gun and physical, and null the only offensive magic they use in Curse. But I was desperate to not need to turn back to my freeze spray strategy that I had used for Mott. This time, I had a plan. Thanks to my hard work boosting Shinya, I had unlocked the ability to bypass the gun resistance of any enemies. What I hadn't accounted for at the time was that it only applies to bullets in Joker's gun, and not the gun skills that his personas use, meaning I had just 8 bullets to defeat all 3 Rangda. My initial plan was relatively simple. Mod one of Joker's guns to inflict freeze, and then freeze the 3 Rangda, leaving them open to be smashed next turn with basic gun attacks. However, I hadn't accounted for my own incompetence. I totally forgot to equip the freeze gun before entering the arena. That meant I needed a new strategy. I remembered that enemies that are knocked down have much lower defenses than other ones, and I still had access to all 3 of the powerful down shots unlocked through the Tower Confidant. I then set about preparing to deal as much damage in a single turn as possible, charging Joker up, whilst ensuring Tarakaja and Rakunda were in effect. With the preparations in place, I knocked down each of the Rangda, and with 1 bullet spare, Joker finished them off. With the Rangda out of the way, the path to Sae was clear. Thor and the Willseed boss Bale stood no chance, and in no time we were ready to face her down. The first phase of the Shadow Sae fight is essentially a cutscene, so we simply wait until we can expose her cheating and the real fight begins. To be truly honest, I have never thought much of Sae's Leviathan form. By this point you can be so powerful that you can demolish her in just a few turns, but in the context of this challenge, she did put up a bit of a fight. Firstly, she rolled fire with her roulette, and used that to great effect to demolish Yusuke multiple times, and take advantage of the 1 Mors from doing so. Furthermore, she now resisted gun, meaning I was doing pitiful damage. However, I started learning from my mistakes, and when she rolled nuke the next time round, I was much more able to manage her damage output, using the very powerful accessories you get from the Willseeds. Finally, she rolled Almighty, not only making her offense more threatening, but finally lowering her defenses down. What had been a defensive battle suddenly flipped, and we both traded big offensive attacks. Whilst she was able to take a few of my teammates down with her, it was ultimately our barrage of gun attacks which would take the victory. With that, we've completed 6 palaces, and we have 3 more to go. I hope you'll join me on the final episode of this challenge, where we'll see just how far we can take it. See you then.
No one can question it. It's a journey.